Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Amplify Your Business. Today, I'm going to be talking to Zach Hodder. He is the founder of Harpia, which is a company out of Calgary doing some really unique things in the sports performance training space. So welcome to the show, Zach.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lance. Appreciate you.
So tell me what, got you interested in starting this business, Harpia, and what problem is it that you're solving with it?
Yeah, so for myself, just to quickly kind of get into my background, I grew up in North Delta, BC, playing minor hockey. Pretty much the stereotype of what people think of like a young Canadian kid would be like. And then I actually went to Notre Dame, Athol Murray College of Notre Dame, out in Wilcox, Saskatchewan, when I was 13 and 14, where I got drafted in the Western Hockey League in the first round of the 2008 WHL Bantam draft to the hometown team, the Vancouver Giants. So I got to play 5 years in the Western League. Yeah. And, it was an experience where I look back and I learned a lot. Definitely have a lot of regrets about the way that, sometimes I went about things, and there's a lot of missed opportunity, which is, I'm lucky I've had that experience early in life. But fortunately, with the Western League, you get a scholarship for every year you play. So I was able to go to school after that on a full ride scholarship, get a degree in communications, a diploma in media, which then led me back to the Western Hockey League, where I became the manager of player development right out of school. So,
very cool.
Yeah. So, I never really thought I'd get back into hockey. I was like, oh, that chapter of my life's done, but obviously got drawn back in. And as the manager of player development, I got to go kind of all over Western North America. I got to see the Seattle Kraken back when they were called NHL Seattle, how they were building out their team in their small office space in Seattle, and seeing like kind of their plans of what they were trying to do. We got to see, the new practice facility that the Ducks had made, as well as like obviously working with all the top minor hockey teams, through the Canadian Sports School Hockey League, as well as the Western Hockey League teams, Hockey Canada. So I was really involved in like kind of all levels. I got to see, the minor hockey kids all the way up to the pros, kind of what they were doing. And, over time, I kind of realized, I had a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit in myself. And, I'd always heard that if you plan on starting a business, the best idea would be to start something you're actually passionate about.
Yeah.
And so for me, I've always been passionate about hockey, and I just didn't really know how to turn that into a business. And so as I kind of went through, I was thinking about, like you talked about, what are the problems? Well, there's a lot of problems with hockey. And for me, the biggest one was cost. Like, cost is really keeping a lot of people out of hockey. And I was like, okay, well, what are the expensive things that we can actually change? I really can't change how much ice cost is going to be. I can't change how much it's going to be to travel. But at first I thought, well, you know what I can do? Gear is really, really expensive. Maybe I could start a hockey, a gear company. And then I looked into that for about a month and realized, oh, I absolutely cannot start that. That is a massive undertaking and a very difficult market to get into. So for myself, I kind of looked at how hockey hadn't really changed in terms of the development techniques. A shooter tutor, I don't know if you know what a shooter tutor is, but that was developed in the 1980s by a pair of brothers who own a trucking company up in Edmonton, believe it or not. And that's still like the standard for kind of off-ice development when it comes to like improving your accuracy with shooting. When it comes to coaching, everybody still has to go to a skills coach. I just didn't see hockey leveraging technology, or sports in general, to be honest, leveraging technology for the player development. If you think about all the companies that exist that are doing, advanced analytics, that are doing computer vision for player tracking during games and practices, we have all this amazing technology that's built for essentially teams and like business, where you can know everything your fans are doing when they're in the rink. But, if you played hockey, playing the game is 10%. The other 90% is, practice development. So I really thought, hey, I think there's a way that we can, number one, make training, sports development more accessible. Because, if you're a kid who's in Black Diamond, Alberta, and you want to go get a skills coach, you're going to have to drive in most likely to Okotoks or Calgary. It's a long drive, and you're going to have to pay a lot of money to go, up to $150 for a session to go train with that coach. So I thought, okay, how are we going to make it, number one, more accessible, but also more affordable, so those kids can have a daily development tool? And that was kind of the problem that I was thinking about, is how can we do that? And that's kind of where the idea came to merge, those traditional development techniques with new technology and provide essentially a development platform for athletes directly on their phone.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds really exciting. And so you're using the power of the smart device then to deploy then, or to administer the training. Is that how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So it actually started, I got an Arduino. I learned how to some small microprocessor. I learned how to code, and I built what it was essentially a full-scale shooter with LED lights and ultrasonic sensors. So every time you shot a puck through where the hole was that was lit up, the sensor would then switch it to the next LED and prompt you where to shoot. And it was this big 4x6 piece of plastic that was massive. And I was like, this is a great product. Here's my MVP. Let's go. And then I talked to about 6 software engineers, and they all said, how are you going to ship a 6-foot by 4-foot piece of plastic? That's going to cost like $200. I was like, oh, okay. And then they were like, also, how hard do people shoot? And I was like, they can shoot up to 100 kilometers an hour. And they're like, so they're going to be shooting 100 kilometers an hour, hitting this piece of plastic with the hardware in it over and over and over again. This thing's going to break down. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm seeing some issues here. Then I told them, well, hey, this is kind of just where I wanted to start, where, what I think is really a unique opportunity is augmented reality in the future, but also leveraging computer vision. I mean, our phones now can essentially function as a computer vision device if you have a script or an algorithm that you developed and you trained it to capture a puck or capture a basketball. There's already applications that do this. Home Court is probably the most famous. It's a basketball training application that's endorsed by the NBA, and it literally does this where it can track every single time you shoot, if you score or if you miss, and then it provides you analytics. And I thought, well, we can do that with hockey too, but I wanted to do it in a more gamified way. So essentially, your phone is your development platform, because in one sense, it's tracking the puck, but in another sense, it's also prompting you of where to shoot from your screen. So it's doing 2 functions at once, but by being able to track a puck and having a algorithm built in, we're able to provide real-time, in-depth analytics by presenting this in a gamified way. So that's how the product essentially functions. It's a computer vision product that we've leveraged into an athlete development platform.
Oh, that's really exciting. It's and obviously, I mean, the starting point being hockey, which is Canada's sport. You have such a huge potential audience there, but this is going to be beyond hockey, right? This is going to go into other types of sports, basketball, baseball, maybe as well. Or what does that roadmap look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So our athlete development platform is transferable. It can go to any single sport. The difference is the presentation. So for hockey, it's going to be a much different presentation than basketball. The one thing we want to do is push you outside of your comfort zone. So that's the only way you're going to be able to get better is, number one, knowing where you're good, but also more importantly, knowing where you're not so great. Because if you know where you're not so great, well, now you can actually start to be like, how can I improve this? And through our platform, we actually can provide you with different techniques to work on those areas where you are deficient. So for hockey, we essentially have what we're calling patterns. So you'll be prompted to shoot to the top left, top right, bottom left, top right, bottom left, bottom left. Everything's being tracked through a computer, and through the phone. And the more times you do the patterns, the more analytics you're going to get, and the more we're going to be able to identify those areas where you're not so great. But more importantly, the more you do it, the more we'll be able to identify even more advanced analytics. So those are saying, when you go from the top left of the net to the bottom right of the net, you're averaging a 50% accuracy. But when you go from the bottom right to the top left, you're 75%. So we're going to present you with some patterns that are really going to test you going from left to right or going from bottom left to top right. So we can actually help you improve those little areas of the game. Now, if you think about that, that's the closest thing we can do in a standstill product to mimic what it would be like to get a pass from across the ice, because your eyes are going from left to right, and then you have to shoot the puck to the target. So yeah, that's kind of like the high level. And then that same platform where you're setting goals, you're having your analytics, and you'll be able to compete with friends. That is transferable to basketball, to soccer, to baseball. It's just the way we present it is going to be a little bit different, but we already have designs for all those products developed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, let's get into some of the lessons that you've had along the way. So I understand that you were part of the Catalyzer program down in Calgary, right? So walk me through a little bit about what that has done for your business, some of the development work that has gone through that, some of the things that you've learned while taking that program and the advisors that you've had access to.
Yeah, so I did that through Platform Calgary. They're calling it the Alberta Catalyzer program. It's kind of like a pre-accelerator for early stage businesses, kind of like myself, and it was tremendous. Being able to have access to the group of advisors that they have and the lessons. So we did 2-hour sessions every night for about 2.5 months, where every session would be not just learning, but also practically implementing through scenarios, through different cases we were working on, but also collaborating with the other founders that were in the program. So for me, the big takeaway was, and they pounded it home pretty much from day one, was you need to talk to your potential customers. Now, for me, when I first started and I was learning how to code on the Arduino and I was building out that product, I didn't talk to anybody. I talked to one business group in Calgary who I said, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. If I came back to you with a product, would you invest? And they said, sure, go make it. So I just went off and made it, and I didn't talk to anybody. In that program, though, they really hammered home, you need to get out and talk to who your audience is, because you might think you have a great idea and you might think you might be solving all their pain points, but at the end of the day, you're only solving what you think their pain points are. If you actually don't go talk to them, you might not understand those hidden pain points that they have, or the things that they really care about. You might think it's having analytics, like we'll use my product for example, but really it might be they just want something that's more engaging for their kids to go do, so they don't get on their phones for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So for myself, it's a little bit of a different, where the product I'm making, I really feel like I'm an expert. I was the manager of player development for the Western Hockey League. I played 5 years in the Western Hockey League. Hockey's been my life. I've been a hockey coach. I really understand the hockey community, the hockey environment, and we're trying to build a really unique and interesting product for that. But at the same time, when it comes to understanding the motivations of the buyer, that's where talking to your customers are really important. Because for me, my target audience might be a youth hockey player from 10 to 18, but they're not the ones who's going to be buying. It's going to be their parents. So understanding from a parent's perspective, what do they value? Like, what are they looking for when it comes to development? Is it price? Is it engagement? Is it something their kids can do every day? And so for me, getting out and talking to my potential clients has been less about talking to the kids. You just show them kind of our MVP, let them run through, but really getting into a conversation with the parents about, what it would take for them to, make a purchase or buy a subscription or talk to their friends about it. So that was really what I took away from the program. And then again, it's hooked me up with Platform Calgary. I'm part of their beta membership now. And for anybody who's in Calgary and in the tech scene, you should definitely go check out their I guess office. It's a downtown Calgary on 9th Street. It's really, really a very impressive facility, and they put on events all the time.
Yeah, totally. Lots of support for entrepreneurs. And so anytime you get an opportunity as an entrepreneur to be able to tap into the wealth of knowledge that these types of programs provide, you definitely want to do it. And so I really like what you were talking about there in terms of just really talking to your customer, getting out there. Now, a lot of our clients and other guests that we've had on this show, are in the food space. And so oftentimes they've done all of that just naturally through their first place of like product testing and sales, which is the farmers markets. Most other industries, you don't have that ability to really get that feedback immediately from people as you're tweaking and adjusting. And so having those intentional conversations is definitely a challenge. And so I'm glad that you guys were really focused on that. Another thing that I know that's really important within those programs is just surrounding the entrepreneurs with advisors. And in our earlier conversation before we hit the record button, you were mentioning that that's something that maybe you really would have wished that you would have done a little bit more sooner. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, like I kind of mentioned, I really siloed myself off intentionally to try to build a product instead of getting out there and actually talking to people who had expertise in outside of hockey. What I mean by that is, the second I started talking to software engineers who have actually built the type of products I'm talking about, they had a lot of ideas about, oh, hey, here's another thing you can use. Here's a software or a development technique that might be beneficial to you. So like I told you before, like I started this in April of 2021, and I wish I would have started talking to people in April of 2021, because, it would have saved a lot of time and a lot of headache. But at the same time, it's good to have that experience of going through that. But the more you can talk to people, and for myself, I have a hard time, to be honest, reaching out and asking people for advice or for help, or for just to say, hey, I want to hear about your story. I know you created a company. Like, what did you go through? I sometimes feel like I'm bothering them, but the more you talk to people, the more you understand they want to help you. They want to see what you're doing. People who have been in this space, they want to help people in this space because they got help too as they went through, their first project or their first startup. And so for me, it's just been, if I see somebody now on LinkedIn that's kind of in the same space or doing something cool, I'll connect with them. I try to do it immediately, because even for me, I'm always a procrastinator. I'll be like, I'll just, they might be busy right now. I'm just like, nope, just
Yeah.
send a message, say, hey, I'd love to, if you're in Calgary, go for a coffee. Otherwise, I just love to connect with you to kind of hear about your story. This is what I'm trying to do. And any advice you could give me would be really great. So the
Yeah.
more people you can really talk to and get that expertise and understand their journey. I mean, for me, I love that. It's just more knowledge. It's more, you might be able to avoid a few road bumps by understanding, hey, oh man, I'm kind of on the same path that guy was on. I need to pivot like he did, but I can do it
Yeah.
3 streets earlier.
Yeah, exactly. And this is exactly the impetus behind Amplify Your Business. This whole series is meant to be that, is to try to have people share their stories so that other people can avoid some of those bumps in the road, as you say. Now, one of the things, though, that is very commonly expressed here, and so I just want to emphasize this for everybody who's listening today, is that advisor part of it. There is a resistance that we have just as human beings, it seems like, to asking for help. And I don't know if it's a pride thing. I don't know if it's a, just don't want to, thinking that the person who you're going to ask is going to turn you down. And so you don't want that rejection, or whatever the case might be. The reality of it is, just like Zach said, is everybody out there typically is willing to help if you just ask for it. We as entrepreneurs, we have all those battle scars. And so we oftentimes are really, motivated to try to help other people avoid some of those. And so, yeah, do what Zach did. Get out there and talk to people who would do it just a little bit sooner, as he's suggesting as well. So Zach, if a year and a half ago, I guess, or no, I guess it'd be about a year, just over a year, is when you started the business. Then you said April of 2021. If somebody were to come to you, an investor, with $1 million right out of the gates, what would you have done with that, knowing now what you do know?
If I knew now what I do know, I would have, number one, put the money in the bank, probably not done anything for a weekend, and just be like, okay, this is a big opportunity. How are we going to go about doing this right? And then, if that person invested, I would be leaning on them. You talk about that expertise. That's somebody where it's like, hey, if you're investing in this, like, I want you not so much as a partner, but somebody I can really lean on and be that support, because you've obviously been successful, whoever, whether it's a venture company, an angel, and look for that support. And then for me, I'd be going out and just getting as many different people's opinion that I could. And for right now, I'm trying to find, the hardest thing is finding a technical co-founder. And it's a lot easier to do when you have, that support and that backing. So I think for me, it would be number one, finding that CTO and kind of building out, number one, a plan of how we're actually going to allocate these resources. What are the absolute must-haves we need, but also how inexpensive can we put out our first product? Because that is something that I think, you could spend the whole $1 million building out your whole vision, but like we'd already kind of talked about, you need to go talk to your customers or your potential customers. So if you can present them using the least amount of funds, kind of like the lean startup method, everybody's read that book, and get that in front of them and get that actual user feedback right away and early, oh my goodness, I don't even know where we'd be right now if we had that. Because I think just having that ability to know that you can put that out, get that feedback, tinker, and then come back to them. Those are how you convert people to early adopters, because they see like, oh, they're taking my advice. They're going to be the ones that really help you get off the ground. So for me, it would be exactly that.
Excellent. Now you mentioned a book, and so from your, just learning entrepreneurship, learning business. What kind of resources are you tapping into besides, I mean, obviously some advisors now, and the program that you went through there with Platform Calgary? What books, what podcasts, what articles and blogs and so on are you following? Are you reading? Or are you tapping into to really keep advancing that knowledge, and then also maybe inspire and motivate you?
Yeah, you know what? A lot of it is like, I love the storytelling that you can get through a podcast. So,
Yeah.
one of the podcasts I listen to, I mean, it's a little bit of business, but it would be Pivot with Scott Galloway and
Yeah.
Kara Swisher. I really love listening to them. They have really great takes. The Land of Giants is another podcast that talks a lot about tech. So those are kind of like the podcast, which is more, listening, understanding, hearing new ideas, and like hearing, people who are actually involved in it with their takes. When it comes to books right now, I'm really trying to focus on leadership. So I'm actually reading Martin Luther King Jr.'s autobiography right now. But that isn't so much for work. I was like, I see the same 5 clips about this guy pretty much every time. I know he had a dream, he was a civil rights leader, but like, what did he actually go through? Like, what were those trials and tribulations? What was it like at the beginning to the end? And just getting to read that has been really eye-opening about like what true leadership actually looks like. I mean, everybody talks about how, they're leaders and they're this and they're that, but I mean, when you actually go in and you're reading a book about him and what he went through and what his family went through, it's incredible. Like that, he should be on the $10 bill. It was absolutely incredible. But from a business perspective, my favorite business book I've actually read about leadership was Ed Catmull, who used to be the CEO of Pixar. He has a book called Creativity Inc. And a big part of it is Pixar, which was called, George Lucas had originally started it for the Star Wars, and then he transitioned it off, and then Steve Jobs came in and bought it. But he talks about a lot of the culture, like how do you make a creative culture? And for me, that's probably one of the biggest things I think about as I start this business is you can have one great product, but you need to iterate on that product as you go through time. And yeah, I might have had a good idea once or twice, but it doesn't mean I'm always going to have a great idea. So how do you get other people to think creatively and to take risks and to push the business forward? And so for me, the book by Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull is exactly about that. How did Pixar continue to be original and create these incredible stories? And it's actually, it's kind of like the lean startup. Like the method that they use to create their movies is the exact same as you would to create a business. And there's some really good lines in there that relate back to business where he talks about new ideas. And he said, every new idea is like a baby. You have to protect it. But every new idea is ugly, and it isn't going to be what it actually turns out to be in the end. But you have to have the vision and the processes to get it where it needs to be. And so I really love that book a lot, and I definitely recommend if anybody is into creative business, it's something that they should definitely read.
Yeah. And there is another quote. I can't remember who it was from, but it was also along that lines of the baby and protecting and that. But then also what they were saying is sometimes you have to kill your babies. And so that leads into a comment that you made before we hit the record button as well. So do you want to just expand upon what we were talking about there?
Yeah. So like I'd kind of talked about, I built out this, I spent literally 6 months learning how to program this Arduino and building this, full-size shooter tutor. And I was really proud of it. And it was a lot of work. And it's all this work leading up to it where you're like, okay, after this, now I get to go and really start the business. And it's exciting. And then I started talking to the software engineers, and they all said the same thing. And the first conversation where the guy that I was talking with is like, well, okay, well, yeah, I could work, but maybe you should do this instead. And I was like, well, that's just one guy. And then the second one kind of said the same thing. And I was like, oh my God. And then after you talk to, 6 or 7, you're hearing the same thing over and over again. It's hard not to feel like, they're attacking you because that was your idea. And you just
Yeah.
spent all this time, like all this time working on this thing that you're so proud to show people and you think is going to be the business. And then coming to the realization that it wasn't wasted time, but it's not going to be the business. And if you really want to be successful, you have to pretty much scrap everything you just did and pivot to what this new business could be, because it actually has the chance to be successful.
Yeah.
And I think just diving into that more, I had built a business plan around this. I had built a marketing plan around this. I had built a social media strategy around this. I had built essentially a business model around all this presentation that I had that was now completely useless. So it's not just that the product changed, it's that the whole business plan has to change as well. And I mean, it takes a long time to write a business plan, and there's a lot of edits and revisions, and it's just, you feel like it's part of you that you're leaving behind a little bit, but at the same time, there's still that opportunity. They didn't kill the dream. They just said there's a better idea.
Yeah. So I'd like to dig into that a little bit more too, because I think this is a really tough thing, because a lot of the successful entrepreneurs will sometimes say they get to that point of kind of like they have to either push all the chips in or walk away. And so you hear those success stories, you hear them where they just did it. They knew what they needed to do and they just pushed it all in, and they moved forward with it, even though there were people who were detractors, who were critics of what it was that they were doing, or naysayers. But there's also a ton of other entrepreneurs who we never hear about, who did the same thing, and then it just completely collapsed. And so in terms of like knowing, how does an entrepreneur, how did you decide that, yeah, okay, maybe I did have this wrong, as opposed to being like stubborn as hell and just, I'm pushing it all in, I don't care what you guys say?
Well, I started stubborn. And then for me, it was just more actually like, I really try to think long term. And I said, okay, if you want to have a long term business, what do you think about this? Your idea is going to be more successful than this other idea. And then for me, it's just, I literally put it on paper. I'm like, okay, well, this product can sell for more, but then, okay, well, now what are all the detractors? Well, like we talked about, shipping costs are through the roof. Returns are going to be through the roof. And plus, when you do a return, you're likely going to have to not only probably send them a new full-size shooter, which is going to be, again, like another $200 for shipping. You have to then take back that packaging as well. So now you're in the hole. You might have sold it for what, $1,000, but you're in the hole for maybe 400 just from one defective. So how many of those can you actually handle before your business collapses because you're shooting a puck against a piece of hardware? And so for me, it was just about kind of removing the emotion completely and just looking at it very much as like, this is a business, and this is a business you want to have be successful. Look at this subjectively and listen to what the experts have said. And the experts were very clear in that this is not a good idea.
Yeah.
And it's just that ego thing where you just kind of have to say to yourself, you weren't wrong, but you weren't right.
Yeah.
And you might be able to be right with this, and then to pivot. And I think there's a lot of examples of companies that cannibalize their own products to make them better. And I think you talk about podcasts, The Land of Giants is another podcast I've been listening to. Talk about when Apple invented or brought out the iPhone. That essentially killed the iPod, which was one of their most successful products. And they just killed it because they knew that in the long term, the iPhone was going to be a better product for them moving forward. And so they made that hard business choice. And for me, I mean, luckily I don't have the pressure that they had. But for me, I looked at it and was like, what am I actually losing? And you don't have a product out. So you don't have any customers that you're actually losing. You haven't really told very many people about this idea. So you're not really got any egg on your face for that. Even if you did, why do you care? And you can pivot right now. And a lot of the work, even though it's in the trash, it's been a lot of research about this area. So you have all this market research that now you can pivot to this new idea. So for me, it was just removing the ego and removing the emotion and looking at it very much as like, what is best for the business?
Yeah, and that's one of the things is I think a lot of people think of something like that as being failure, or that there is just complete loss within a failure or within a pivot, and that's not the case at all. The amount of information that you've learned, you've gone through that process, even if you couldn't use any of the market research that you were doing when you were building out your business plan. You now have gone through that process. The next time you go through it, it's just going to be a lot easier because you understand the process now. So just really, that's the simplest way of saying that there's so much value in every one of those pivots or non-starts or cannibalizations like you mentioned. So that's I don't think it's a problem at all. I think it's part of the journey. Now, speaking of the journey, that you've had a couple things happen very recently here. Do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the big things that are going on in the business right now?
Yeah, so actually just today we got approved by the App Store. So our beta application it's in test flight right now, which is up, and I'm sending out links to a few people that I'm talking with. I go to, luckily here in Calgary, there's a lot of rinks, outdoor rinks, I should say, especially in the area I live. So during the winter, I was pretty much 4 or 5 times a night, or sorry, 4 or 5 times a week, I was heading out to a few of the different outdoor rinks and just kind of talking with players and parents about my idea. And now it's summertime, so there's not as many players out there right now, but there's still a few. And I go out now with our test flight beta app, and I'm taking them through it and having them download it. And but luckily, we just got approved to be on the actual Apple App Store. So we have our beta up there now, and people will be able to download it through there. Like we talked about it with Ed Catmull, it's a baby. It's ugly, but it's a beta. It's an MVP-ish. It's definitely up from an MVP, but it's definitely not a finished product. But it's a great tool even for hockey players right now to be able to be kind of pushed outside of their comfort zone a little bit and start to record their progress, set some goals, and they can really use this app to do that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really, really big deal because I mean, that's a huge step to get into the store. So now in terms of next steps, what's on the horizon and what does the next 6 months look like for you?
So our next 6 months, now that we've got this on test flight and soon to be fully live on the App Store, is for me, it's getting as many different test cases, getting back out to my customers now with this product. And there's kind of two reasons for that. Number one, obviously I need that feedback, but number two, the more people I can show that have been using this, or I can show have downloaded this, I need to go out for funding here in the next couple of months. I really want to build this out to the full vision that I have and that we have for what this can be. And for investors, they want to de-risk their investment. This is a niche market. This is we're not trying to sell something to the world. We're trying to sell something to a niche but motivated group of people. And the more people we can have on the app and using it and kind of providing feedback, the easier it'll be to show that there is a market for this. So for me, it's just a lot of conversations right now with people reaching out and saying, hey, I'm not ready for funding yet, but I might be in a couple months. What are you looking for? So I'm doing market research on kind of the funding side as well, and starting those conversations. But more importantly, it's getting this in front of people, talking with them about kind of not just what's being presented, but the whole vision of what we're trying to accomplish. And, luckily I have some good marketing pieces that I provide to, so they can actually see what we plan to have it look like, not what it currently looks like. So that's kind of the next months for us. And we're just kind of getting ready to explore different funding opportunities.
Well, that's exciting times for sure. So if somebody wanted to get in contact with you, ask you some questions so that you can be that advisor to them potentially, or get their hands on the app if they wanted to try the beta, how would be the best way to do that then?
Quite honestly, shoot me an email, connect with me on Twitter. So my email is Zach, ZACH at Harpia, HARPIA.ca, or find me on Twitter at Zach Hodder. Don't really go on Instagram that much, not on TikTok, and don't do Facebook, but I'm addicted to Twitter, which I know I got to change too. But that's the best way to get in touch with me, or connect with me on LinkedIn. I always like to talk to people, even if you're interested in something outside of sports, got a wide range of interests. So definitely love to connect with anybody.
Sounds great. Okay, so that's a wrap on this episode. If anybody wants to check out our archives, head over to amplifyyourbusiness.ca. That's where you're going to find all of our future episodes as well. And if you happen to be an entrepreneur who has an interesting story and you want to share it with everybody, there's an application form so that you could be a future guest potentially. Also, if you enjoy these episodes through an audio version, we do now have them available on all of the major podcasting platforms. So just search Amplify Your Business on your favorite podcasting platform. Until next time, everybody stay safe and have a prosperous day.